Sometimes we may become disillusioned with God because we have the wrong perception of Him. If we are expecting that as soon as we become a Christian and we begin following Him and doing everything He asks us to do, then everything is just going to be easy. He's going to bless us. Everything is going to fall into place. We aren't going to have any problems. Then we're going to get upset with God. We're going to think, okay, you're powerful. You love me. What's going on here? And so today we're going to talk about what happened with Joshua whenever God called him to lead the Israelites. This will give us a better understanding as to what we should expect from God, so we don't become frustrated and either think that He's not good or we're not good. So let's go ahead and just start reading. This is Joshua 1. I'm going to read just the first 5 verses. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore, arise, go over this Jordan, you and all the people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, towards the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. So after Moses died, God comes directly to Joshua. And He says, okay, you've been Moses' assistant all this time. Moses is gone. Now it's time for you to take over. And I want you to take the people into the promised land. You're going to cross over the Jordan and take possession of the land that I promised to Abraham and every generation after. Your generation is going to inherit this land. Now, before we go on, I want to talk about who Joshua was. Moses has ruled Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Now he's gone, and Joshua is going to be the focus of this conversation. And so Joshua was first seen right after they left Egypt as the military leader who defeated the Amalekites. So we know that he is a military warrior. That's the first thing. But after that, he's just talked about as Moses' assistant. He went on Mount Sinai with Moses. He went to the tent of meeting whenever God talked to Moses there. And he was one of the 12 spies that was sent into the land during the first generation. He was from the tribe of Ephraim, and he was 30 years younger than Moses. Only he and Caleb, out of all the 12 spies, wanted to go into the land at that time. All the rest of them were afraid and didn't want to go in. Joshua and Caleb tried to convince the people, but they couldn't be convinced. And so at that time, God said, only Caleb and Joshua will enter the land from this first generation because they're the only 2 that trusted in me. Now, Joshua was born in Egypt, and his parents named him Hoshea, and that means desire for salvation, presumably because they were desiring to be saved from the slaveholders there in Egypt. But Moses renamed him Joshua, which means God saves, because he no longer has to desire to be saved from the Egyptians. God did save them from the Egyptians. Now, Joshua in Hebrew actually is pronounced Jesus. And God told Mary and Joseph to name their son Jesus because he would save the people from their sins. So that's very interesting. Joshua is leading the saved people into the promised land, just like Jesus will lead us into the promised land. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. And so this is around the year 1405 BC, around the year 1400. And Joshua is 90 years old, and he is leading the people into the promised land. And only he and Caleb are there from the first generation. And God's already given the detailed boundaries to Moses of the land that they're supposed to take. But he gives general boundaries to Joshua here. And so the land would stretch from the Mediterranean Sea on the west to the Euphrates River on the east, and then north to Lebanon and south to the Nile in Egypt. So Joshua is called to lead the people into the promised land, and God will make him successful. God's already given them the land, and all Joshua has to do is just lead the people in to take it. That's it. And so then, after God gives him the boundaries and tells him he's going to be with him, he gives him further encouragement. This is God's motivational speech, the commander of the army giving a motivational speech to Joshua before he leads the people into battle. And so this is verse 6 through 9. It says, "Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Don't be frightened and don't be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." So I want you to notice that even though Joshua is a military warrior, God gives him no military strategy for success. His success will not be built on schemes and plans and military strength. They will be successful by relying on God. That is their strategy for success. And so 3 times God says, be strong and courageous. But this is not a physical strength. This is a spiritual, emotional strength that God is telling Joshua he needs to have. This is going to be a long war, and he will continuously have to be courageous to lead these people. They are not physically strong, and they're outnumbered. So the only way they win is by relying on God, God's strength. That's what they will rely on to win this battle. And so because Joshua is their leader, he needs to be strong in his mind and in his heart. And he needs to be courageous so that he can inspire that in his men. All Joshua had to do is obey God. That was his sole responsibility, just obey God. But in order to obey God, he needed to know God's words. And in order to know God's words, he needed to study them. And so God said, keep my words close to you, the words that Moses wrote. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Keep that close to you and don't deviate from the things that are written there. So Joshua had to read these words and really know them in order not to deviate from them at all. Then God said, meditate on these words. That is how they will take root. That's how you will understand them. That's how they will become a part of you, and you will be able to follow them. So meditate on them every day and then follow them. Joshua is going to need not only knowledge, but wisdom to be a good leader. And God is telling him exactly how to get that. Read the word, know it, meditate on it, and act on it. That is how you will be wise. So after God gives Joshua all these instructions, Joshua turns to the people and begins to prepare them for battle. So I'm going to read the rest of the chapter starting in verse 10. Joshua commanded the officers of the people, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, prepare your provisions, for within 3 days You are to pass over this Jordan to go in and take possession of the land that the Lord your God has given you to possess. To the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you. The Lord your God is providing you a place of rest, and he will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in this land that Moses has given you beyond the Jordan. But all the men of valor among you may pass over armed before your brothers and shall help them, until the Lord gives rest to your brothers, as he has to you, and they also take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to the land of your possession, and you shall possess it, the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan towards the sunrise. And so then the people responded, all that you have commanded us, we will do, and wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we have obeyed Moses in all things, so we will also obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you, as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your commandment and disobeys your words, whatever you command him, shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. So, first he tells all the people, go gather your things. Soon we will cross over the Jordan into the land that God has promised us. Then he turns to the 2.5 tribes that have already been given land on the eastern side of the Jordan. Remember that they had fought the kings of Sihon and Og and conquered that land, and Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh asked if they could live in that land instead of the land on the other side of the Jordan. This land was fertile. They had already built things for their livestock and all of that, and they wanted to stay there. And Moses had agreed to let them do that, but he said, you get to rest in your land until all of the Israelites get to rest in their land. And so you can have this land as your inheritance, but you don't get to take possession of it until the rest of the tribes get to take possession of their land. So your wives and your children and your livestock can stay here on the eastern side of the Jordan, but all of the men that are fighting age still need to cross over the Jordan, and they need to fight with the rest of the tribes and conquer that land fully. And then when everybody gets to inherit their allotted piece of land, you will get to cross back over and take possession of your land here on the eastern side of the Jordan. And then notice how all of the people replied. They answered Joshua, all that you've commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we followed Moses, we will follow you. If anybody rebels against you, we will put them to death. We are serious about this. They were fully backing Joshua, right? They wanted Joshua to know, we accept you as our leader. We see that Moses has been grooming you for this role, and God has anointed you as our leader, and we will follow you. That's very important, right? Because Joshua knows that he's been called of God. But if the people don't accept it, then he's not only fighting against his enemies in the new land, but he'll be fighting against other people. And so they wanted to assure him that won't happen. If someone rises up against you, we'll put them to death. We're going to be behind you 100% because we trust God, and we trust that God has put you in a position of leadership over us. And so we will follow you into this new land as you follow the Lord. That must have been such a huge relief to Joshua to know that the people were 100% behind him. And even they encouraged him. We accept you as our leader. Take courage and lead us. That must have been a great encouragement to Joshua.